It all started when I was cut out of every major family decision, left in the shadows while my siblings and cousins were handed the reins to our family empire. The wealth, the power, the influence, they all belonged to them. I was just an afterthought. You won't believe the one move I made to change everything. Stay with me. Tell me your name, where you're watching from, and please don't forget to subscribe to this channel because this story might hit closer to home than you think. My cousin Harrison got control of the real estate division when he turned 25. My brother Marcus was given oversight of the investment portfolio at 23. My cousin Olivia was appointed to the board of directors of our family foundation before she even finished her MBA. And me? I was given a job, a salary position, in the marketing department of one of our smaller subsidiaries. We think it's important that you learn the business from the ground up, my Uncle Charles told me when I questioned why I wasn't being given the same opportunities as the others. He said it with this patronizing smile, like he was doing me a favor. You need to prove yourself first. Prove myself. As if being born into this family wasn't proof enough. As if having the same last name, the same DNA, the same inheritance rights meant nothing. But my cousins and siblings didn't have to prove anything. They were just given. Given positions, given power, given trust. The difference was never explicitly stated, but it was always there, hanging in the air like smoke. They were pure bloodline. Old money on both sides. I was deluded, tainted by my mother's humble origins. It wasn't always like this. I grew up with them. I love them. But things changed when the fortunes started slipping through their hands. I thought they'd come to me for help, someone who knew what to do, but they never did. The first signs of trouble appeared about 5 years ago. The market shifted, and several of our major investments took significant hits. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make people nervous. Enough to make the quarterly family meetings more tense, more fraught with anxiety. I saw it coming before they did. I've been paying attention to the markets, studying economic trends, following the indicators that suggested a correction was imminent. I'd even try to bring it up at one of the family meetings. I think we should consider diversifying our portfolio more aggressively, I'd said. My voice steady despite the dozen pairs of eyes suddenly focused on me with varying degrees of surprise and condescension. The tech sector is overvalued, and when the correction comes, when did you become an economic expert? Harrison interrupted, that smirk on his face that I'd come to know so well. Last I checked, you were working in marketing, not finance. I've been studying the markets, I said. I've been tracking the patterns, and I think that's adorable. Olivia cut in, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. But I think we should leave the financial strategy to those of us who actually understand these things. No offense. No offense. As if those two words could erase the insult. My Uncle Charles, who chaired these meetings, simply moved on to the next agenda item as if I hadn't spoken at all. As if my concerns, my observations, my attempts to help were nothing more than background noise. 6 months later, the correction I'd warned about happened. We lost $30 million in a single quarter. Did anyone remember my warning? Did anyone acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, I'd been right? No. They were too busy blaming external factors, bad luck, market volatility that no one could have predicted. Except I had predicted it, and they'd ignored me. For years, I swallowed my pride, pretending everything was fine. But there was a breaking point. One day, I overheard them laughing. They were talking about the future, and I wasn't even in the conversation. It was Thanksgiving. The whole family had gathered at the estate in Connecticut, a sprawling mansion that had been in the family for 4 generations. I'd arrived late because of work, and I was looking for my father when I passed by the library. The door was half open, and I heard voices inside. My brother Marcus was there. Harrison, Olivia, my Uncle Charles, and my Aunt Patricia, and my father. They were drinking expensive scotch and discussing the family's 5-year plan. Who would take over what divisions? How they'd restructure the holdings to maximize returns? Who would represent the family on various boards and committees? What about your other son? That was my Aunt Patricia's voice. Shouldn't he be part of this discussion? There was a pause. Then my father spoke, and what he said changed everything. He's doing fine where he is, my father said, his voice carrying that same dismissive tone I'd heard so many times before. He's not really cut out for this level of responsibility. You know how he is, more like his mother. Good heart, but not quite one of us. Not quite one of us. My own father, saying I wasn't really part of the family. Harrison laughed. Actually laughed. That's a diplomatic way of putting it, Uncle Robert. The guy works in marketing, for God's sake. Can you imagine him in a board meeting? He'd probably suggest we rebrand the family legacy or some nonsense. More laughter. Even my father chuckled. That's when I realized they were never going to see me for who I truly was. They saw me as nothing more than a side character in their lavish story. I stood outside that door, frozen. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribcage. Every instinct told me to walk away, to pretend I hadn't heard, to continue playing the role they'd assigned me. But something else was rising inside me. Something hot and fierce and undeniable. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage. Not the explosive kind that makes you kick down doors and start shouting. No, this was the cold kind. The calculated kind. The kind that makes you step back, take a breath, and start planning. It crushed me. But instead of crumbling, something inside me snapped. I made a choice. A bold, dangerous choice. And I was going to play the game on my terms, even if it meant risking everything. I turned around and walked away from that door. I didn't confront them. I didn't make a scene. I went back to my car, drove back to the city, and I started working. That night, I made a list. Everything I knew about the family business. Every asset, every investment, every deal, every relationship. I've been working in that marketing department for 5 years, and while they thought I was just shuffling papers and creating brochures, I'd been paying attention, learning, understanding how all the pieces fit together. See, the thing about being invisible is that people forget you're watching. They have conversations in front of you they'd never have in front of someone they considered a threat. They leave documents on desks, send emails without checking who's CC'd, discuss strategy in hallways because they don't think you matter enough to be listening. I'd accumulated 5 years of intelligence without even trying. Now I was going to use it. The family's biggest vulnerability was their complacency. They'd been wealthy for so long. They'd forgotten that fortunes can disappear. They made decisions based on tradition and status rather than sound business strategy. They kept people in positions of power because of their last name rather than their competence. And they were hemorrhaging money because of it. I spent the next 3 months doing something I'd never done before. I built my own network, not through the family connections, not through the old money social circles, but through genuine relationships based on mutual interest and respect. I reached out to people I'd met over the years who'd actually seen my potential. A professor from business school who'd always told me I was sharper than I gave myself credit for. A former colleague who'd moved to a venture capital firm. An old friend who'd started his own investment advisory company. I told them I was looking to branch out to make some investments of my own. I didn't tell them about the family situation. I didn't need to. They saw something in me that my own family refused to see. Potential. I knew the family fortune was slipping through their hands, and they were too blind to notice. So I did the unthinkable. I played my cards carefully, waited for the perfect moment, and then I made my move. The opportunity came 6 months after that Thanksgiving. My Uncle Charles had been negotiating the sale of one of our smaller companies, a tech startup we'd acquired 5 years earlier that had never quite taken off the way we'd hoped. He was planning to sell it for scraps, just to get it off the books. But I've been watching that company. I've been following what they were doing. And I saw something my uncle didn't. They were on the verge of a breakthrough. They developed a piece of software that was about to revolutionize data security for small businesses. They just needed capital to scale it properly. My uncle was going to sell it for $5 million to a competitor who would have stripped it for parts. I knew it was worth 10 times that, possibly more. So I made a call to my friend at the venture capital firm. I pitched him the opportunity. Within 2 weeks, we'd put together a consortium of investors who were willing to buy the company for $7 million. More than my uncle's offer, but still a fraction of what it would be worth in 2 years. But here's the thing. I structured the deal so that I personally retained a 20% equity stake as a finder's fee for bringing the opportunity to the investment group. My uncle was thrilled. He'd gotten more than his asking price, and he didn't have to deal with the headache of the company anymore. The family board approved it without hesitation. They probably didn't even read the full contract. Why would they? It was just a minor subsidiary, not worth their attention. They had no idea I'd just positioned myself to make a fortune independent of the family wealth. 18 months later, that company was acquired by a major corporation for $250 million. My 20% stake netted me $50 million. $50 million that I'd earned entirely on my own. Not inherited. Not given. Earned. It wasn't just about money. It was about respect. I didn't need their approval anymore. I was ready to take what was mine. The moment I decided to act, everything changed. I walked into that room, my head held high, and I did what no one expected. The next quarterly family meeting was different. I walked in, but I wasn't the same person who'd been dismissed and ignored for years. I was someone who'd just made more money in a single deal than most of them had made in a decade of managing family assets. Word had gotten around, of course. In our world, that kind of success doesn't stay quiet for long. People talk. Business journals write articles. Investors start paying attention. My Uncle Charles was the first to bring it up. Well, he said, raising his glass of scotch in my direction. Looks like someone's been busy. Congratulations on your windfall. Windfall. As if it had been luck. As if I hadn't seen the opportunity they'd missed, hadn't taken the risk they'd been too conservative to take. Thank you, I said simply. I didn't elaborate, didn't explain, didn't seek their validation. Harrison was staring at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Uncertainty. Maybe even a hint of respect. How did you know? Olivia asked. How did you know that company would be worth that much? I paid attention, I said. I did my homework. I understood the technology and the market opportunity. It wasn't that complicated. My father was quiet. He was looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Really seeing me. Perhaps, my Uncle Charles said slowly, we should discuss bringing you more into the fold. Clearly, you have a talent for identifying opportunities. And there it was. Suddenly, now that I'd proven myself outside of their structure, now that I'd made money on my own terms, they wanted to bring me in. But I wasn't the same person who desperately wanted their approval. I wasn't the same person who would have been grateful for their table scraps. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I'm building something of my own now. I've started my own investment firm. I'm working with some exceptional people, and we're pursuing some exciting opportunities. The room went silent. You could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. Your own firm? My brother Marcus finally spoke up. You're competing with the family? I'm not competing with anyone, I said. I'm just doing my own thing. But if any of you are interested in partnering on deals, my door is always open. As equals. That last word hung in the air. As equals. Not as the grateful nephew finally allowed to participate. Not as the outsider looking for scraps. As equals. My Uncle Charles's face went red. This family has given you everything. The education, the opportunities, the network. And now you want to go off on your own? This family gave me a job in a marketing department and told me to be grateful. I said, my voice calm but firm. Everything else, I've had to build myself. And that's fine. I'm not angry about it anymore. But I'm also not interested in waiting for permission to succeed. I stood up. If you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with some investors. Uncle Charles, thank you for hosting as always. I'll see you all at Christmas. And I walked out, head high, confident, free. In the end, my move earned me everything I'd been denied. The respect, the recognition, and yes, the wealth. But what I didn't expect was how it would change me. Over the next 2 years, my investment firm grew exponentially. I made smart bets on emerging technologies. I invested in companies that others overlooked. I built relationships based on merit and mutual benefit rather than family connections and old money networks. And I was good at it. Really good. Within 3 years, my personal net worth exceeded most of my family members' individual holdings. Not because I'd inherited it, not because it had been given to me, but because I'd earned every single dollar. The family dynamics shifted in ways I never expected. My cousin started reaching out, asking for advice. My brother Marcus actually apologized for how he'd treated me over the years. My Aunt Patricia invested in one of my funds. Even my father, proud and stubborn as he was, eventually came to me. It was late on a Tuesday evening. He showed up at my office unannounced, something he'd never done before. My assistant was surprised. She'd never met him, never even heard me talk about him much. "Can we talk?" he asked. We sat in my office, and for the first time in my life, my father looked uncertain, vulnerable. "I was wrong," he said finally. "About you. About what you were capable of. About who you are." I didn't respond immediately. I let his words sit in the silence between us. "You reminded me of your mother," he continued. "And I thought that meant you wouldn't fit into this world, that you wouldn't understand the business, the legacy, the responsibilities. But I was wrong. You understood it better than any of us. You just understood it differently." "I'm still like her," I said. "I'm still the same person I always was. I just stopped waiting for permission to be that person." He nodded. "Your Uncle Charles is stepping down next year. The family wants to restructure the holdings, bring in new leadership. They've asked me to talk to you about coming back. About taking a leadership role." "As what?" I asked. "The prodigal son who finally proved himself worthy? The outsider who's now convenient to have around?" "As family," he said quietly. "As my son, who I should have believed in from the beginning." It was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get from him, and we both knew it. The feeling of finally standing on my own, taking control of my future, it was like I was reborn. I became the person they never thought I could be. But it wasn't just the victory that mattered. It was the journey that taught me who I truly was. I did go back eventually, but on my terms. I took a seat on the family board, but I maintained my own firm. I consulted on major decisions, but I kept my independence. I helped them restructure their holdings, modernize their approach, and yes, I helped them make back the money they'd been losing through complacency and poor strategy. But I never forgot what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be told, in 1,000 subtle ways, that I wasn't good enough. And I never let them forget it either. I didn't need to wait for their approval. I was worthy all along. That's the thing they never understood. Worthiness isn't something that's granted by others. It's not something you inherit or receive as a gift. It's something you claim for yourself, through your actions, through your choices, through your refusal to accept anyone else's limitations on who you can be. My mother taught me that, though I didn't realize it at the time. She'd come from nothing and built a life through sheer determination and refusal to be defined by her circumstances. The family saw that as a weakness, as evidence that she didn't belong. But it was actually her greatest strength, and it became mine too. The irony is that in trying to keep me at arm's length, in treating me as less than, they created exactly the kind of person who could outmaneuver them. They made me hungry in a way they'd never been. They made me strategic in ways they couldn't understand. They made me independent when they should have made me dependent. They created their own competition. Looking back now, I can see how every slight, every dismissal, every moment of being overlooked actually served me. It forced me to develop skills they never had to learn. It made me resourceful in ways they never needed to be. It gave me a perspective they couldn't access because they'd never had to fight for anything. My cousin Harrison is still managing the real estate division, but he calls me before making major decisions now. My brother Marcus invested heavily in one of my funds and made a fortune. Olivia left the family foundation to start her own venture capital firm. She said I'd inspired her to step out of the family shadow. Even my Uncle Charles, who'd been the most dismissive of all, admitted before he retired that I'd been right about more than he cared to acknowledge. But the validation I'd once desperately wanted, by the time it came, I didn't need it anymore. I'd already validated myself. This wasn't just about money or family. It was about proving that no matter how many times you're pushed aside, you can still rise. I think about all the people out there who feel invisible in their own lives, who are told, explicitly or implicitly, that they're not good enough, that they don't belong, that they should be grateful for whatever scraps they're given. I think about the people who are overlooked because they don't fit the mold, because they come from the wrong background, because they don't have the right connections or the right pedigree or the right last name. And I want them to know what I learned. Their outsider status is not a weakness. It's a superpower. When you're on the outside, you see things insiders miss. You understand struggle in ways they never will. You develop resilience they never had to build. You learn to create opportunities rather than wait for them to be handed to you. The very thing that makes you feel like you don't belong is the thing that can make you unstoppable. My family thought they were protecting their legacy by keeping me at a distance. But what they were actually doing was forcing me to create my own legacy, one that wasn't dependent on their approval or their wealth or their acceptance. And that legacy, the one I built myself, is worth more than anything they could have given me. Because it's mine, truly mine, not inherited, not given, not granted as a favor, earned through intelligence, hard work, strategic thinking, and the refusal to accept anyone else's definition of what I could achieve. Do you feel like an outsider in your own life? Have you ever made a bold move to claim what's yours? Maybe you're working in a family business that doesn't value you. Maybe you're in a career where you're constantly overlooked. Maybe you're in a social circle where you never quite feel like you fit. Maybe you're in a relationship where you're always made to feel like you're not quite enough. Whatever your situation, I want you to understand something. Being underestimated is a gift. Being dismissed is an opportunity. Being told you're not good enough is the fuel you need to prove everyone wrong. Not for their benefit, but for yours. The bold move I made wasn't just about starting my own firm or making that first big investment. The bold move was deciding that I didn't need their permission to be successful, that I didn't need to wait for them to see my value before I started building something valuable. The bold move was walking away from the table where I wasn't valued and building my own table. One where I got to decide who sat down, who was heard, who was respected. And here's what I learned. When you build your own table, suddenly everyone wants a seat. The same people who dismissed you start asking for your advice. The same people who overlooked you start seeking your approval. The same people who made you feel invisible start treating you like you're the most important person in the room. Not because you changed, you were always that person, but because you finally stopped waiting for them to recognize it and started recognizing it yourself. That's the real victory. Not the money, not the status, not the revenge of proving them wrong. The real victory is the moment you realize you never needed their validation in the first place. You were enough all along. You just had to be willing to see it for yourself and act on it. So what's the boldest move you've ever made? What's the moment you stopped waiting for permission and started taking what was yours? What's the time you walked away from a table where you weren't valued and built something better? Or maybe you haven't made that move yet. Maybe you're still waiting, still hoping that if you're patient enough, good enough, quiet enough, they'll finally see your value. Let me tell you something. They won't. Not until you see it first. Not until you stop waiting and start building. Not until you stop seeking validation and start validating yourself. That's the move that changes everything. That's the decision that transforms you from an outsider to a leader, from invisible to invaluable, from overlooked to undeniable. My family treated me as an outsider, and for years, I let that define me. I let it limit me. I let it convince me that maybe they were right, maybe I didn't belong, maybe I wasn't good enough. But the moment I stopped accepting their narrative and started writing my own, everything changed. I didn't need to be included in their story. I needed to write my own. And when I did, when I finally made that bold move and claimed what was mine, I didn't just earn wealth or respect or recognition. I earned myself, my confidence, my independence, my unshakable knowledge that I am exactly who I was meant to be, and that's more than enough. That's what I want for you. Not just success, but the deep, unshakable certainty that you are worthy of it, that you don't need anyone's permission to claim it, that you have everything you need inside you right now to build the life you deserve. So stop waiting. Stop seeking approval from people who will never give it. Stop measuring yourself against standards that were designed to keep you small. Make your bold move. Build your own table. Write your own story. And watch as the same people who made you feel invisible suddenly can't take their eyes off you. Not because you changed, but because you finally stopped hiding who you've always been. You subscribing to this channel is a huge support and growth to our community. Hope to see you subscribed.